Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and this is a Humber Super Snipe. This is what happens when Europe, or in this case the UK, tries to make an American car. Today I'm going to show you some of the interesting features of the Snipe, and we're going to discuss in more detail whether it's actually any good. It was owned by the Rootes Group, and one of the Rootes brothers, William Rootes, was absolutely obsessed with Americana. As a result, he decided to make this with some of the features that echoed the American cars. You can see the twin headlights there, which is quite typical of, for example, the Plymouth Fury, otherwise known as Christine from the Stephen King books. There's also the chrome, and there are some, if you look at it from a sort of side profile, 3/4 profile, very reminiscent of a 1955 Chevy, albeit quite a bit smaller. So the Snipe was an upper end car. I'd say it was positioned just below Jaguar, maybe around Rover level or just above. Now it was known as the poor man's Rolls Royce, but in actual fact it wasn't owned by poor men at all. It's archetypally known as the bank manager's car or driven by architects, middle management sort of vehicle. But it has some lovely touches. I mentioned the sort of chrome, the Americana everywhere, but just check out where the fuel tank is. So neat. On the reflector light, then there's this lovely little blanking plate for the key so you don't see the keyhole, all integrated into the back of the car. And overall, I think they've done a reasonably good job of making it look American. Maybe though on, I don't know, a 7/8 scale, because it certainly isn't as wide as the American cars or as long. So the interior though doesn't look that American in terms of acres of wood everywhere, absolutely lovely quality thick leather. You do have a couple of nods, I suppose. You have the column mounted shifter that I really like, and actually this is still very British, you even have picnic tables at the back which are also veneered. The question is though, okay, it looks American, they did a pretty good job on that. How does it drive though? Does it drive like an American car? Does it drive like a British car? Is it good? Is it bad? Let's find out, and I'll tell you more about the engine and the chassis as well. Right, well, we're off to a good start because the engine sounds good. Now this little dash shifter, I have to say, I love it. You pull the lever slightly towards you and then you engage it and drop it back, and we are off. I haven't driven anything much like this ever, I don't think. I don't tend to do cars quite this old, and generally speaking I tend to go for the sporty stuff. At first acquaintance, I can tell you already, the steering is incredibly vague. It is however very light, which I guess is good in this kind of car. Ride at walking speeds is immensely good, really is, and this is a nice place to be. Noise at this stage seems to be very limited. The engine is there, you can hear it, but it's quite muted. Brake pedal is fairly firm. Not sure if it would be good in a crunch in terms of stopping power. We'll try that a bit later actually. It really is pretty slow. Now, what engine does this have? Well, the other difference I think to an American car is that it only has a 3-litre straight six. Now, it produces 138 horsepower, which isn't terrible for the type. It has twin Strombergs, and I think this one is particularly slow because it has the 3-speed Borg-Warner Slushmatic, and combined with quite a high weight, it does seem to be blunting performance. Now, although mechanically the noise is pretty good, wind noise is quite bad. Now, with this older car, it could just be that the seals have gone, although they don't look like it, but there is quite a bit of wind noise coming from the quarter light there, which is, even though it's shut. The steering is so vague, I'm not even sure where I'm placing it on the road. I'm sure it will get easier as I go. Like, in terms of ride, it really reminds me of a Rolls. It's just sort of demolishing any bumps. This has got a lot of low frequency bumps, this bit of the road, and I don't think any car that I've driven has completely managed to iron them out. With this, there's literally just a tiniest hint. Okay, I'm going to put my foot down here, we have to at least once, and see just how slow it is. I think the American cars would have had a lot more pace than this with their massive sort of 5-6 litre V8s. Foot to the floor, it's just changed down a bit. It's actually holding its revs. Changed into third just now at 60, where obviously I will let go because that's the limit of this road and I never break speed limits. It is slow, it is really quite slow, but I think if you go back to when this car was being sold in the late 60s, well, okay, it probably wouldn't have felt quite that bad. So there's a lot of drivability there. It's obviously got a fair bit of torque, so if you just push your pedal down a little bit, it does respond immediately. You can feel that. Problem is though, push the pedal down more, it doesn't really make that much difference. It's obviously just a lack of overall power, but with good torque. I do find the steering disconcerting still because it is moving around an awful lot. Now, surprisingly, chassis-wise, it's a little bit more advanced than you would give it credit for. It actually has double fishbones at the front. Okay, a solid rear axle, but still, for the time, that is pretty good. Maybe that's why the suspension seems to be working so well. And I totally understand that the steering has to be light like this. This is the kind of car that was made to go from A to B on this kind of road probably, because 60 seems to be the perfect speed. There's not too much noise, you're not stressing the engine too much. And you want it to be an effortless drive. And it kind of is, but it's just a bit too vague. Perhaps the steering box on this is worn, but it doesn't feel like that. It does respond. It just takes a while to acclimatise maybe. Now, it's a sad story what happened to the Roots group that owned Humber. But essentially, soon after this car was made, perhaps even just before, Chrysler took it over because they made the Hillman Imp as well, which basically ended up bankrupting them. And unfortunately, all the marques within it were bought by Chrysler, but Chrysler only held on to the group for a few years. I don't know if it was 3 or 4 years, then gave up the ghost, and they sold it on to Peugeot, and it all completely died. Peugeot had a factory here, took over one of the factories, or both of them, I can't remember, but those are now gone as well. So there's absolutely nothing left. Now, right in front of me here, there's a little emblem of a bird, and the Snipe, I initially thought the Humber Super Snipe, because in a way, what an inappropriate name for this car. It makes it sound like a real sort of aggressive sports car, and it's anything but. But Snipe doesn't refer to like a sniper as I thought. It is actually, I think it's a marine bird or perhaps a lake bird that fishes, you know, one of those ones with a really long beak. I'll put a picture of it up now. So you've got that lovely little emblem on the wheel as well. Driving position wise, this is perfect. Steering wheel, excellent, good reach, good positioning. I don't know if it's, it probably isn't movable, but you don't need to move it, or at least I certainly don't. You've got good room for your legs. The pedals are where you want them to be, loads of room up there. Oh, okay, in the S's, what is the Humber like? Ooh, pretty terrifying. Under braking, it pitches forward a lot, and that's not at high speeds. And then the corners, like initial turning is vague and terrible. When it loads up a bit, it becomes a bit more positive actually. Yeah, I mean, we always knew, right? I think it does drive very much like a similar American car would do. Perhaps it's obviously a little bit lighter, it might be a little bit better, but it's not far off. It does feel like an American tank. Right, on the way back through the S's, and let's just be a bit smoother with it and not upset it with sudden braking maneuvers. You know, and then it's okay, it's got a modicum amount of grip. You just don't really want to be using the brakes through corners because that just upsets the chassis balance too much. It does wander though. Stephen has owned this car on and off, I think, since 1990. I think he got it as a student. He wanted an American car, but apparently at the time they were too expensive, these classic American sort of coupe sedans. So he went for this, and I think a few years later, he wanted to sell, he wanted to buy another car, and his dad bought it off him because he said, no, it'd be a shame for you to get rid of it. I want to keep it in the family. And recently, Stephen inherited it again. And it looks in pretty good shape. I think, he uses it regularly, at least once a week, which is absolutely awesome. So it's a good drivable car, and I'd say the interior is in great condition. I love the instruments, all the various sort of little switches. The wood veneer is very nice. And ultimately, it's a car that looks pretty good, I think, especially if you like your Americana. And it's a sort of quite an interesting point in British history to have a car like this that does have some British qualities, the way it's finished, the comfort, the seats, the leather, but mixed with this strange sort of American heritage as well. It's a fascinating car. Thank you so much, Stephen, for having brought it down. I really appreciate it. If you guys have a car that you would like me to do a review on, one of your own cars, please do get in touch. This is the best address. I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.